For 4 years, Evelina was called barren. Her husband, the Duke of Belgrave, threatened to divorce her. His mother humiliated her. Even his sister mocked the empty nursery. And Evelina believed she might truly be the problem, until she finally walked away. Months after marrying another man, Evelina became pregnant. That should have silenced the family. Instead, it uncovered a secret buried inside Valemont Hall for decades, because Evelina was Henry's third childless wife. And once the family finally asked what all three marriages had in common, everything began to unravel. Stay with me until the end, because the truth behind this family is far more shocking than anyone expected. Dinner at Valemont Hall had become an ordeal. Evelina Marlowe learned to endure without showing how deeply it wounded her. 4 years had passed since she became the third wife of Henry Valemont, Duke of Belgrave. 4 years of waiting, 4 years of disappointment. 4 years in which every month that passed without a child seemed to become another charge laid against her. That evening, the accusation came from the Dowager Duchess Marcella Valemont. "A duchess has one essential duty," Marcella said. "She must provide an heir. Titles and estates cannot be preserved by beauty and pleasant manners." Evelina lowered her eyes. She had learned that answering Marcella often made matters worse, but silence did not protect her either. Across the table, Henry's younger sister, Lady Isolde, regarded Evelina with the same disapproval she had learned from her mother. "The nursery remains empty," Isolde remarked. "It seems strange to keep rooms prepared for children who never come." The word struck Evelina harder than her expression revealed. Henry said nothing. That silence had become familiar. What made their judgment crueler was that Evelina was not the first woman to suffer beneath it. Henry's first marriage had produced no child. His first wife had been blamed. His second marriage had ended the same way. No pregnancy, no heir. Again, the wife had carried the shame. Then Henry married Evelina. Now, after 4 childless years, the Valemonts had reached the same conclusion for a third time. The woman must be at fault. Yet Evelina had already sought the opinion of Dr. Percival Rowan, the physician who had attended the Valemont family for years. Rowan examined her as far as the medicine of his day allowed, and found no obvious illness or physical condition that could explain why she had never conceived. That answer had left Evelina with a question she was almost afraid to ask. "Doctor," she had said cautiously, "is it possible the difficulty does not lie with me?" Rowan understood what she meant. He did not offer certainty where none was possible, but he told her something the Valemonts had never permitted themselves to consider. Though women commonly carried the blame for a childless marriage, the difficulty could sometimes arise from the husband. For Evelina, those words changed everything. There had been another husband before her, another wife before the second, 3 marriages, not 1 child. She took the possibility to Henry carefully, hoping he might at least consider speaking with Rowan. Henry's pride would not permit it. "There is nothing wrong with me." Marcella's reaction was harsher. "How convenient," she declared. "Unable to perform your own duty, you now seek to place your failure upon my son." Evelina tried to explain that Rowan himself had said such a thing was possible. Marcella would hear none of it. Henry did not defend his wife. Instead, the threat he had used throughout their marriage returned: divorce. Whenever another month passed without the announcement everyone expected, Henry reminded Evelina that he could put an end to their marriage and find another woman. For years, the threat frightened her. She wanted her marriage to survive. She endured Marcella's contempt, Isolde's remarks, Henry's coldness, and the humiliation of being treated as though her entire worth rested upon a cradle she could not fill. But after that dinner, something finally changed. Henry followed Evelina from the dining room. "Perhaps Mother is right," he said. "Perhaps I should finally divorce you and marry a woman capable of giving me an heir." He expected fear, perhaps tears, perhaps another plea for patience. Evelina looked at the man she had spent 4 years trying to please. Then she reached for her wedding ring. She drew it slowly from her finger and held it toward him. "Then do it." Henry stared at her. For once he had no answer. "You have threatened me with divorce so many times," Evelina said quietly, "that you never considered I might one day accept it." The threat that had controlled her had lost its power. And with that, the marriage that had brought Evelina 4 years of humiliation came to its end. When it was legally dissolved, she left Valemont Hall. Marcella wasted no time deciding what others should believe. Henry, she insisted, had simply suffered extraordinary misfortune. 3 wives had failed him. 3 women had proved incapable of giving the Duke of Belgrave the child his family required. As Evelina's carriage disappeared from Valemont Hall, Marcella stood beside her son with complete certainty. "Your next wife will give you the heir the other 3 could not." Henry believed her. Marcella believed herself. But 3 women had already left Henry's bed without a single pregnancy. 3 different wives had been blamed. And not one person in Valemont Hall had seriously questioned the only person all 3 childless marriages had in common. Leaving Valemont Hall freed Evelina from her marriage, but it did not immediately free her from the judgment attached to it. For almost a year, she rebuilt her life beneath the weight of whispers. People knew that Henry Valemont, Duke of Belgrave, had ended 3 marriages without producing a child, yet society found it easier to speak of the women. Evelina heard what was said about her often enough. The Duke had discarded her because she was barren. 4 years as his wife had produced no child, and for many people that was proof enough. Evelina learned to live without answering every cruel assumption. She had spent too many years defending herself inside Valemont Hall. She would not spend the rest of her life doing the same beyond its doors. Then she met Gideon Wycliffe. Gideon was a widower, several years older than Evelina, and his life bore little resemblance to Henry's. He was neither a duke nor a powerful aristocrat. He had inherited modest property and commercial interests, and had improved his circumstances through years of careful management. His home was comfortable and well kept, but it possessed none of Valemont Hall's magnificence. Gideon had no desire to pretend otherwise. He did not squander money merely to impress society. He kept reserves against difficult years, paid those who depended upon him properly, and took care that his household remained secure. More important to Evelina was the manner in which he treated her. Before she agreed to marry him, she told him what she feared he deserved to know. "I was married to Henry for 4 years," she said. "In all that time I never conceived." Gideon listened without interrupting. Evelina forced herself to continue. "I cannot promise you a child. I may never be able to give you one." She had prepared herself for disappointment. She had lived too long among people who measured a wife's worth by whether she could fill a nursery. Gideon did not. "I am asking you to be my wife, Evelina," he told her. "I am not asking you to prove your worth to me." Those words reached a place in her that 4 years at Valemont Hall had left deeply wounded. They married quietly. There was no need for a grand display. Evelina entered a household smaller than the one she had left behind, yet she found something within it that grandeur had never given her. Peace. Several months after the marriage, Evelina began waking with an unfamiliar sickness. She tired more easily. At first, she dismissed it. When the nausea continued, a possibility entered her mind that she scarcely dared entertain. She refused to believe it. Hope had disappointed her too many times. Concerned for her health, Gideon sent for Dr. Nathaniel Mercer, a physician from their own district. Mercer had no connection to Henry, Marcella, Dr. Rowan, or anyone belonging to the Valemont household. After attending Evelina and observing her condition, Mercer gave her the answer she had once believed she might never hear. She was with child. Evelina could not speak. For 4 years she had been called deficient. She had been humiliated at dinner tables, threatened with divorce, reminded of an empty nursery and made to carry the blame for a childless marriage. Now she was carrying a child. Gideon's delight was immediate, but when he saw how overwhelmed she was, he made certain she understood something more important. The child had not increased her worth in his eyes. He had wanted Evelina before there was any child to celebrate. Had their marriage remained childless, she would still have been his wife and still have deserved his affection and respect. Months later, Evelina gave birth to a healthy son. News of the birth spread. Eventually, it reached Valemont Hall. Marcella attempted to dismiss what it suggested. She had spent years declaring Evelina responsible for the failure of Henry's third marriage, and she would not readily abandon that certainty. But Isolde could not dismiss it so easily. She remembered every remark she had made about the empty nursery. She remembered believing her mother when Marcella insisted that Evelina was incapable of bearing children. Yet Evelina had borne a child, with another husband, and once Isolde allowed herself to consider that fact, the past began to look different. Henry's first wife had borne him no child. Neither had his second. Evelina had spent 4 years with him without conceiving, 3 women, 3 childless marriages, and now one of those women had conceived after leaving him. For the first time in her life, Isolde stopped looking at Henry's wives for an explanation. She looked at her brother. And a question Marcella had never permitted anyone in Valemont Hall to ask finally entered Isolde's mind. What if the women had never been the problem? Evelina's pregnancy left Isolde with a question she could no longer silence. She went privately to Dr. Percival Rowan, the physician who had served the Valemont family for years, and asked him what no one in her family had ever seriously considered. "Doctor, can a husband be the reason a marriage remains without children?" Rowan did not hesitate. Yes. He explained carefully that the limits of medicine did not always allow a physician to determine why a marriage remained childless. But one thing was certain: the woman could not justly be blamed in every case. The difficulty could lie with either husband or wife. Isolde returned to Valemont Hall deeply unsettled. She remembered Evelina sitting silently beneath Marcella's insults. Worse, she remembered adding her own: the empty nursery, the cruel remarks, the certainty with which she had treated Evelina as a failure. If Rowan was right, Isolde had helped torment a woman who might never have been responsible at all. She confronted Marcella. "Doctor, Rowan says the difficulty can lie with the husband." Marcella's expression hardened. "There is nothing wrong with Henry, but Evelina has borne a child. That proves nothing concerning my son." The more Isolde pressed her, the more fiercely Marcella rejected the possibility. She would hear no suggestion that Henry might be incapable of fathering an heir. Isolde noticed something she might once have overlooked. Her mother was not merely dismissive. She was defensive. Before long, Henry married again. Lady Sabine Corvell became his 4th wife. Sabine came from a family blessed with many children, and Marcella seized upon that fact as though it settled every question. "This time," she declared, "Henry has chosen wisely." She spoke confidently of the heir Sabine would give him, but no announcement came. A year passed, then another. And slowly, Isolde watched the old cruelty return. Marcella's disappointment became criticism. Her criticism became accusation. Sabine began hearing the same insinuations Evelina had endured. Something must be wrong with her. She was failing her husband. She was failing the family. At breakfast one morning, Marcella directed another humiliating remark toward Sabine. This time Isolde refused to join her. "No." The single word silenced the table. Marcella stared at her daughter. Isolde continued. "Henry has been married 4 times. His first wife never conceived. Neither did his second. Evelina spent 4 years as his wife without conceiving, yet after marrying Gideon Wickliffe, she bore a healthy son. Now Sabine has remained without child as well. Henry's face darkened. Enough, Isolde. But she had remained silent long enough. How many women must we blame before we consider the one husband they all shared? Henry rose in fury. Marcella was fiercer still. How dare you speak of your brother in such a manner? Sabine, however, did not remain silent. She has the right to ask. That changed the argument. Henry could dismiss Isolde as an interfering sister. He could not as easily ignore the fourth wife being prepared to suffer the same condemnation as the three before her. Reluctantly, angrily, he agreed to be examined by Rowan. The physician promised no certainty that the medicine of his time could not provide. He considered Henry's physical condition and medical history. He considered 4 marriages without a known pregnancy. Most troubling of all was the pattern Henry could no longer dismiss. Evelina had remained childless throughout 4 years with him and had later conceived with Gideon. When Rowan finally spoke, he chose his words carefully. I cannot give you absolute certainty, Your Grace. But everything I am able to observe, together with the history you have given me, provides substantial reason to believe that you may be incapable of fathering a child. Henry was devastated. For years he had believed women had failed him, his first wife, his second, Evelina, and he had nearly allowed the same cruelty to consume Sabine. He had threatened Evelina with divorce until she finally accepted it. He had watched his mother humiliate her and had chosen his pride over the possibility that Evelina might have been innocent. Now another question began troubling him. If the difficulty truly lay with him, what did that mean for the family whose blood and name he had spent his life trying to preserve? His thoughts returned to his late father, Duke Nathaniel Vailmont. Near the end of Nathaniel's life, there had been arguments with Marcella that Henry had never understood. Nathaniel had become suspicious and withdrawn. One memory returned with terrible clarity, his father's voice raised behind a closed door. Do not make me ask what I already fear to know. At the time, Henry had not understood what Nathaniel feared. Now he could not forget the words. He began going through old family correspondence, searching among letters that had remained undisturbed for years. Then he found one addressed to Marcella. It had been written decades earlier. Henry read it once, then again. At the bottom was a name he knew well from the history of his father's life, Sir Matthias Duval, Duke Nathaniel's closest friend. But the words Matthias had written to Marcella carried an intimacy Henry could not explain away. Whatever had existed between them, it did not sound like the correspondence of a man writing innocently to his best friend's wife. Henry could not dismiss Matthias Duval's letter as an unfortunate discovery from a distant past. He examined the old correspondence again, this time paying greater attention to the dates. That was when the uneasiness became something far worse. Matthias had written to Marcella during a period when Duke Nathaniel had been away from Vailmont Hall for an extended time. Henry searched further and found another letter from that same period. This one had been written by Marcella. It was addressed to Nathaniel. Marcella had urgently begged her husband to return to Vailmont Hall, claiming that she was unwell and desperately needed him beside her. Nathaniel had returned. Not long afterward, Marcella announced that she was with child. That child had been Henry. The dates alone did not tell Henry everything, but they told him enough to understand why Nathaniel had become suspicious many years later. His father had discovered some of the same correspondence. Nathaniel had looked backward. He had known when he was away from Vailmont Hall. He had known that Matthias, the man he trusted as his closest friend, had remained near Marcella. He had known that his wife had suddenly summoned him home. What Nathaniel had not understood at first was why. Now Henry feared he did. He went to Matthias and confronted him with the letters. The older man had carried the truth for decades, and faced with the evidence of his betrayal, He finally ceased denying the past. When Marcella had first married Nathaniel, she had expected motherhood to follow quickly. It had not. Months passed, then more months, and Marcella did not conceive. She did not yet believe that Nathaniel might be incapable of fathering children. Her fear turned inward. She believed she was the one failing, and with every childless month, her anxiety deepened. In Marcella's mind, producing an heir was necessary to secure everything she possessed as Duchess: her marriage, her position, and her future. She became afraid that if she could not give Nathaniel a child, all of it might one day become uncertain. Instead of waiting, Marcella chose to secure her position herself. During one of Nathaniel's prolonged absences, she turned to the man he trusted most, Sir Matthias Duval. Their relationship crossed the boundary neither had any right to cross. Then Marcella discovered she was with child. The pregnancy gave her what she had desperately wanted, but it also threatened to expose what she had done. Nathaniel had been away. If the timing raised questions, Marcella could lose far more than the security she had tried to protect. So she wrote to her husband. She claimed illness. She told Nathaniel that she desperately needed him to return. Nathaniel hurried home to his wife. Marcella resumed marital relations with him, deliberately creating a believable explanation for the pregnancy that would soon become apparent. Months later, Henry was born. Nathaniel accepted the child as his own. He raised Henry as his son. Henry listened to Matthias with growing horror. The man he had believed to be his father throughout his entire life had unknowingly raised the child of his closest friend. Then Matthias finally spoke the words Henry could scarcely bear to hear. "I am your father." Henry was shattered. For years, he had been consumed by the need to produce a Valemount heir. He had allowed 3 wives to carry the shame of his childlessness. He had nearly condemned a 4th. Now even the truth of his own birth had been torn from beneath him. Marcella could no longer avoid what had been uncovered. When confronted with the letters and Matthias's confession, she could not deny that Henry had been conceived through her relationship with Matthias. But Isolde heard the confession differently. If Matthias was Henry's father, another question immediately followed. She looked at him. "Are you my father as well?" Matthias answered without hesitation. "No." Isolde stared at him. Matthias told her that what had happened between himself and Marcella had ended after Henry's conception. He had never resumed the affair. The answer left Isolde with nowhere to turn except toward her mother. Henry and Isolde shared Marcella's blood. But if Nathaniel had not fathered Henry and Matthias had not fathered Isolde, then Isolde could no longer assume she knew the truth of her own birth. She faced Marcella. "Then whose daughter am I?" Marcella refused to answer. She left the room rather than give Isolde the truth, but Isolde followed her. For years, she had accepted her mother's certainty without questioning it. She had repeated Marcella's judgments. She had helped humiliate Evelina because she believed everything her mother taught her about wives, children, and family honor. Now those certainties had begun collapsing one after another. Isolde would not allow Marcella's silence to become another command she was expected to obey. "I spent my life repeating your lies," she told her mother. "I hurt other women because I believed you." Marcella still would not answer. Isolde did not retreat. This time, her mother's anger could not frighten her into silence. She demanded the one truth Marcella was still desperately withholding. "Tell me who my father is." Marcella tried to escape Isolde's question with silence. Isolde would not allow it. "Tell me who my father is." For years, Marcella's authority had been enough to end any argument within Valemount Hall, but too much had already been uncovered. Matthias had confessed that he was Henry's father, and he had made it equally clear that he had never resumed his relationship with Marcella. There was no one else to answer for her. At last Marcella spoke. After Henry's birth, Nathaniel had accepted the boy completely as his son, But as the years passed, he wanted another child. None came. This time, Marcella's fear began to change. When she had first failed to conceive with Nathaniel, she had assumed the difficulty was hers. That fear had driven her into Matthias's arms and led to Henry's conception. Years later, she began to wonder whether she had been wrong from the beginning. Perhaps the difficulty had never been hers. Perhaps Nathaniel was incapable of fathering children. The thought terrified her. If Marcella could conceive with another man but never with her husband, then Henry's very existence became dangerous evidence. She needed Nathaniel never to ask the question she had finally begun asking herself. Matthias would not return to her. Then, during another period when Nathaniel was away, Captain Leander Vale came to stay near the estate while recovering from an injury. Marcella and Leander became involved. Then Marcella discovered she was with child. Her first concern was Leander. If he remained near Valemont Hall while her condition became apparent, someone might remember when Nathaniel had been absent. Worse still, Leander himself might understand what the timing meant. Marcella could not allow that. She persuaded Leander that what had happened between them had become too dangerous. If he remained nearby, she told him, they risked destroying themselves. Then she used her influence to encourage an opportunity that would take him away from the district. Leander departed. He never knew Marcella was carrying his child. Only after he was safely gone did Marcella turn once more to Nathaniel. She summoned her husband home. As she had done before Henry's birth, Marcella created circumstances upon Nathaniel's return that would give him every reason to believe the coming child was his. Then Isolde was born. The truth left Isolde almost unable to speak. The man she had believed to be her father throughout her life was not her father. Neither was Matthias. Captain Leander Vale was. Did he know? Isolde finally asked. Did Leander know about me? Marcella answered quietly. No, Leander had left without knowing that Marcella was with child. He had never known that Isolde existed as his daughter. Henry had listened in grim silence, but another question remained. Did father discover the truth? Marcella denied it. No, but Henry could no longer accept her answer merely because she gave it. He had seen the correspondence. He knew Nathaniel had eventually found Matthias's letters to Marcella. He knew his father had begun looking backward at dates and absences that had once seemed unimportant. Nathaniel knew when Matthias had remained near Marcella. He knew when Marcella had urgently summoned him home. And once Nathaniel began to suspect that Henry might not be his son, there was every reason for him to examine the circumstances surrounding Isolde's birth as well. Another absence. Another man near Marcella. Captain Leander Vale. Another summons home. Another pregnancy afterward. Henry remembered how suspicious his father had become near the end of his life. He remembered the arguments. He remembered Nathaniel's anger and the words that had once made no sense to him. Do not make me ask what I already fear to know. Perhaps Nathaniel had never obtained a confession. Perhaps he had never possessed absolute proof. But he had been getting closer. He had begun to see the pattern. And then, before he could expose whatever he believed Marcella had done, Duke Nathaniel suddenly became seriously ill. Henry looked at his mother. The room seemed to tighten around the silence between them. You knew father was getting close. Marcella said nothing. Henry's expression changed. And then he died. Marcella did not answer Henry. She tried to leave. This time, neither of her children allowed her to escape behind silence. Isolde was relentless. Her mother had just admitted that Captain Leander Vale was her father, and that Leander had never even known he had a daughter. For Isolde, there could be no return to obedient silence after that. You have lied to me all my life, she said. Now tell us the rest. Henry demanded the same. Under the pressure of both children, Marcella finally confessed what had happened near the end of Duke Nathaniel's life. Nathaniel had discovered Matthias's letter. He had examined the dates and remembered his own absence from Valemont Hall. He remembered Matthias remaining near Marcella. He remembered the urgent message that had brought him home and the pregnancy announced afterward. There had been no means by which Nathaniel could establish Henry's parentage with absolute certainty. But he had understood that Marcella had deceived him, and once he questioned Henry's birth, his suspicions had turned toward Isolde. Again, Nathaniel remembered being absent. Again, another man had been near Marcella, Captain Leander Vale. Again, Marcella had summoned her husband home before announcing another pregnancy. Nathaniel intended to expose her. Marcella panicked. Everything she had spent years protecting stood on the verge of collapse. Her marriage, her position, her reputation, Henry's place within the family, Isolde's understanding of her own identity. Then Nathaniel became seriously ill with a severe complaint of the stomach. While he was weakened by the illness, Marcella personally gave him a preparation containing something harmful. His condition worsened dramatically. Nathaniel died. Those around him believed his illness had taken his life, but Marcella knew otherwise. She had prevented her husband from revealing what he had discovered. Henry could scarcely comprehend what he was hearing. Nathaniel had not given him life, but he had given him everything Henry had believed defined him. He had given him the Valemont name. He had raised him as his son. He had never made Henry feel that he was anything less, and that man had died because he came too close to discovering how thoroughly his wife had deceived him. Marcella attempted to defend herself. She insisted that everything she had done had been done to protect her children and preserve the family. Isolde rejected it. "You protected your secrets." Henry looked at his mother, and suddenly another truth became impossible to ignore. Marcella's hypocrisy had begun long before Evelina entered Valemont Hall. Years after Henry's birth, Marcella had failed again to conceive with Nathaniel. That was when she had begun to suspect that perhaps the difficulty had never been hers. Perhaps Nathaniel had been incapable of fathering children. Marcella therefore knew from her own life that a childless marriage did not automatically prove something was wrong with the wife. Yet she had taught Henry precisely the opposite. His first wife had not conceived. Marcella blamed her. His second wife had not conceived. Marcella blamed her. Evelina endured 4 years of humiliation because Marcella insisted that the absence of a child proved she had failed as a wife. Then Sabine remained childless, and Marcella had begun treating her in exactly the same manner. 4 women had been placed beneath the same judgment. And all along, Marcella knew there was another possibility. Henry finally understood what his mother had done to him as well as to his wives. "You did not protect me," he said. "You taught me to blame women because the truth frightened you." Marcella had no answer that could undo what followed. For decades, she had obsessed over preserving the Valemont bloodline. She had deceived Nathaniel to place children before him as his own. She had guarded that deception so fiercely that Nathaniel had died before he could expose it. Yet the bloodline Marcella had sacrificed so much to preserve had never continued through her children at all. Henry was the son of Sir Matthias Duval. Isolde was the daughter of Captain Leander Vale. Neither carried Nathaniel Valemont's blood, and the final cruelty of Marcella's certainty now stood before them. Henry, the son she had defended whenever anyone dared, suggest that the difficulty might lie with him, had substantial reason to believe he was incapable of fathering a child. Marcella had demanded an heir from one wife after another. Henry had believed her. Women had suffered because of it. Now Henry knew the truth about his mother. He knew the truth about the man who had raised him, and he knew the truth about himself. But knowing the truth did not erase what had already been done. 3 women had spent years carrying blame for something that had never been theirs to carry, and one of those women had already built an entirely new life without him. Sabine left Henry. This time, he did not condemn the woman who walked away from him. He did not call her incapable. He did not accuse her of failing her duty. And when Marcella attempted to place the old blame upon Sabine, Henry stopped her. Sabine had suffered enough. For the first time, Henry accepted that ending a marriage did not give him the right to place its childlessness entirely upon his wife. But Sabine was not the only woman to whom he owed an acknowledgement. Privately, Henry reached out to his first two wives. He admitted that he had blamed them without justification. He had allowed each woman to leave their marriage carrying a shame that should never have been placed upon her. He apologized. Neither woman owed him forgiveness, and Henry no longer expected an apology to erase what he had done. Isolde faced a similar reckoning. She remembered the remarks she had made to Evelina and the cruelty she had helped strengthen simply because she trusted Marcella's judgment without question. So Isolde wrote to Evelina. She admitted what she had done. She apologized without asking Evelina to comfort her and without demanding forgiveness in return. At Valemont Hall, Marcella's authority was never the same. Henry and Isolde now understood the woman behind the commands they had once obeyed unquestioningly. Her greatest loss was not merely the exposure of her secrets. It was the loss of the power those secrets had helped her preserve. Far from Valemont Hall, Evelina continued the life she had built with Gideon. Gideon remained exactly what he had always been, a responsible man of comfortable but ordinary circumstances. Careful management gradually improved his property and commercial interests, but no title suddenly appeared before his name. And no miraculous fortune transformed their household into another Valemont Hall. He simply provided well. He kept his affairs in order, protected the security of his wife and son, and gave Evelina something wealth and rank had never guaranteed her: respect. Eventually, at a country gathering, Henry saw Evelina again. Gideon stood nearby with their young son. Evelina was laughing. Henry stopped. During the 4 years she had lived at Valemont Hall, he could scarcely remember hearing that sound. He approached her. Evelina's laughter faded when she saw him, but she did not shrink from his presence. "I owe you an apology," Henry said. Evelina regarded him calmly. Yes. There was no cruelty in the answer. There was also no attempt to spare him from the truth. Henry told her what Rowan had concluded. The difficulty had been with him. His first wife had not failed him. His second wife had not failed him. Evelina had not failed him. Sabine had not failed him. "I should have believed you," he said. Evelina shook her head. That was not the lesson she wanted him to carry. "You should have respected me." Henry fell silent. "Even if the difficulty had been mine," Evelina continued, "would that have made those 4 years right? If I truly could never have borne a child, would I have deserved your mother's contempt, your threats, your humiliation?" Henry had no defense, and at last he understood the distinction. Evelina's pregnancy had proved that the accusations against her were false. But she should never have needed a pregnancy to prove that she deserved dignity. She did not offer forgiveness merely to relieve Henry of his guilt. His remorse belonged to him. Evelina had already moved beyond the life in which his approval determined her happiness. She returned to Gideon. Their son was waiting with him. Henry watched the 3 of them leave together. The family he had once accused Evelina of being incapable of giving him existed before his eyes. Yet that was not what gave Evelina value. Her worth had existed when the nursery at Valemont Hall was empty. It had existed when Marcella mocked her. It had existed when Henry threatened divorce. And it would have remained even if Evelina had never borne a child. For years, the Valemonts had asked what was wrong with the women: the first wife, the second, Evelina, then Sabine. Nobody had wanted to ask whether Henry might also be experiencing the difficulty. Marcella's hypocrisy made that injustice even greater. Decades earlier, She herself had begun to suspect that Nathaniel might have been incapable of fathering children. She knew such a possibility existed, yet pride and fear drove her to bury it while she condemned other women. The truth was never that childlessness belonged to women, nor was the lesson that it belonged to men. The truth the Vailmonts had refused to accept was simpler. The difficulty could arise from either husband or wife, and neither deserved humiliation because a marriage had produced no child. Henry had demanded that wife after wife prove herself while refusing to question himself. By the time he finally did, 3 marriages had already been destroyed, and a 4th had nearly suffered the same fate. Evelina left the gathering beside Gideon and their son. Henry remained behind. Her pregnancy had exposed the mistake. Marcella's secrets had exposed the hypocrisy beneath it, but the lesson reached far beyond Vailmont Hall. When a husband and wife struggle to have a child, blame should never fall upon the woman simply because she is the woman. A husband may also experience the difficulty. And sometimes justice begins with something painfully simple, having the courage to question both sides before condemning either one. If Evelina's story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments like this story, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Until next time, never condemn someone before you know the truth.